Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate the hearing. This is good stuff. Dr. Gupta, just trying to follow up a little bit on what my good friend and colleague Rep. Bill Rockus was talking about. But on the flip side, if given your role in venture capital, if we were to do HR3, how or would that impact investments in the biotechnology startup sector?
Thank you, Congressman. I think that the impacts would be far-reaching. They'd be wide, and they'd be generally negative. I think that if there are sectors that could seek that investment that provide safer returns or better returns, the prospect of that, you may see a diminishment of the types of risk that investors are willing to take in biotech.
Would there be any difference if instead of the benchmarking to a set price, we just allowed negotiations on the part of Medicare like we do VA and certain states Medicaid? Would that be different?
I think that it unfortunately doesn't help address the core issue, which I think remains the barriers to access primarily at the end of the funnel, which is out-of-pocket costs, and price controls of any sort do not ensure that the payers will pass those savings on to patients. So I hesitate to suggest that there may be some amount of negotiation without focusing first on what we see as the larger problems.
Okay. I just saw negotiation as distinctly different than benchmarking personally. We do that in so many other areas, and I assume that a lot of folks take that into account when they make their investments going forward. Ms. Sachs, you mentioned a couple of other topics you'd like to see the committee address, maybe at a later date, looking at other parts of the supply chain. I think this committee totally agrees with you. We've had numerous hearings over the last several years on this. Are there particular policies that address entities beyond the pharmaceutical manufacturers that you think we should be really prioritizing?
Yes, absolutely. So in particular, in thinking about the ways in which different actors have incentives to drive prices up rather than down, I do think it's important to look not just at the pharmaceutical industry, but also at the roles insurers, pharmacy benefit managers, and even physicians or provider groups in general can play in driving prices up rather than down. So this committee has already considered some of these proposals, but others would include taking a closer look at pharmacy benefit manager practices, at some of these issues in terms of spread pricing. I know this is also a topic of robust interest at the state level, with several state attorneys general interested in either having already brought lawsuits against the topic or certainly discussing so publicly.
You've also discussed a little bit about considering the linking of clinical value to price of drugs paid for, particularly by a governmental entity. Do you think that allowing governments to craft arrangements, for a drug, paying for it over a period of time, or based on outcomes, would be beneficial also?
Congressman, I actually think that's two different questions, and so I'm going to answer them very briefly because I know we're short on time. So first, this idea of value assessment, if we have two drugs that are treating the same condition, value assessment means we want to pay more for the drug that works better. And if we do that, companies will know that the better the drug they make, the more money they're going to make. They'll invest more in products treating unmet needs. But this idea of value-based pricing, which has come up already in a discussion today, that's what the pharmaceutical industry wants to call it, this idea of outcomes-based contracts. But there's nothing about either the initial or the rebated price of the product, which are necessarily tied to its clinical value. So I like to call them innovative contracting models. The point I want to make about them is that they're voluntary for industry to engage in. Industry won't engage in these deals unless they think it makes them more money, not less. Right now, they're not required to enter into those deals, and that's certainly of concern for payers.
Well, that may be something we'd want to work on in the future to get at those concerns that you have. I'm a big supporter of negotiating prices in the Medicare arrangement. We already do it VA. We do it for many states and Medicaid. But I also want to make sure we get something done. I do have some reservations about the indexing personally, and so do my constituents. I've heard from a bunch of them of late. But I think there's overwhelming bipartisan, bicameral agreement to work on some sort of solution here that encompasses some of HR 19, which is great, but doesn't go far enough. And maybe something not quite as robust as our HR 3. But I'm feeling good about the opportunity here and really appreciate having the hearing, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I yield back.